Dr. Craig Marsh is our Chief Academic Officer for the University of Roehampton. So welcome, Dr. Craig. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Pearl. It's good to be here.
Great. Could you just turn on your video just so that our speaker's great? We can see you now. Perfect. So, Dr. Craig Marsh, could you just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your role as Chief Academic Officer?
Yes, I'd be delighted to, and let me add my welcome to everybody. Very warm welcome to our discussion today. So my role as Chief Academic Officer really falls into two main areas. The first is a relationship with our partner university, the University of Roehampton. It's to make sure that our programs are well maintained, well managed, and delivered to the highest quality. The second main role is looking after the faculty who teach the programs. So that's also an important job because those are the people you'll be coming mainly into contact with when you start your program. So those are the two main areas that I work on. Well?
Great, thank you. And our second panelist today is Colin Brennan. He is an enrollment advisor for the University of Roehampton. So welcome, Colin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Pearl. Happy to be here.
Great. And can you just maybe give a quick introduction about what your role is as an enrollment advisor and what people can expect from you as supporting the Roehampton process?
Okay, sure. Well, basically, as a member of the enrollment team, I'll be your first point of contact really with the university. I'll help you out with your application, with any kind of information you need about the programs or about the university. And then even once you finish your application, once you're actually a student of the university, either me or one of the enrollment team would be working with you right throughout your first module, just to make sure that you're enjoying everything in the classroom and there's no hiccups when it comes to your studies. So we're basically there to right the way through, right from your first contact through to the end of your first module, and we're always very happy to help. So welcome to everybody, and I hope that we can see some of you become students in the near future.
Great, thank you, Colin. So just to give you an overview of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to have a quick introduction to the University of Roehampton. So Colin's going to tell us a little bit about the university and its background and history, and then Dr. Craig Marsh will then discuss the role of strategic human resource management in the modern organization, highlighting HR strategy and how this can become a central strategic area within any business or company. Following this discussion, we will take the time to ask questions to Dr. Craig Marsh. So this really is your opportunity to put your questions through. So if you have questions during his presentation, please send them through to the Q&A, and we'll have a nice discussion at the end, and that's really your opportunity to get a deeper understanding of HR from Craig Marsh. Colin will then bring the webinar to a close, talking a little bit about the online learning environment and what you can expect from an online program with the University of Roehampton Online. So, Colin, can you just start the webinar today by giving us a quick introduction into the University of Roehampton and its online programs?
Sure. Well, the University of Roehampton is a university with a very long, proud tradition of education in the UK. As you can see there on the screen, it's one of the oldest institutes of higher education in all of Great Britain, dating back to 170 years ago through its 4 constituent colleges. And from the very beginning, it's something that the university has always been quite forward about, quite proud of. Trying to broaden the reach of education. It's the first institute of education in the UK that had classes that were solely constituted by females, for example. And even to this day, it's something that the university is still trying to kind of push the boundaries of education, offering our management programs to students from all around the world, trying to give a chance for students to experience study and education with the University of Roehampton. So for the last year, the university has been partnered with Laureate Education to offer the campus programs online. It's something we're very proud of, and it's something that, it's a great partnership for the university, and, I mean, that's the kind of most modern update for the university at the moment. So
great, thank you. Thanks, Colin. And we'll come back to you later to talk a little bit about the online learning environment, what students can expect in the online portal. So moving on to our feature presentation today, so the role of strategic HRM in the modern organization. So Craig, you gave us a little bit of background about you with the being Chief Academic Officer and what that means for the institution. But you also have an extensive background also in human resource management. Can you tell us a little bit about that background and how that impacts your role and also how it impacted the program itself as well?
Yes, sure, Pearl. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, just by way of explaining why I could be here talking about strategic HR. So before I joined Laureate, I divided my career roughly between industry and academia, and the industry part of my experience was working in senior HR roles in organisations in the UK and Europe. So I gained a lot of direct practical experience in HR. And then when I turned to academia, my academic discipline was indeed strategic HR. So I took my doctorate in that, and the last research that I was doing is on the role of strategic HR in business model change, which provides the subject of the next few minutes.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you, Craig. And just a reminder, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of Craig's talk, so please do send your Q&A through the Q&A box. So over to you, Craig, and we've handed you the ball, and it's all over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Pearl. So I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation in business models and how HR plays or can play a really important role in this strategic priority for organizations. Why is it a strategic priority? Well, I think we've all seen the rise of the internet, and the effect that that's had not only on internet businesses but also on traditional businesses. So the research that I'm going to present to you was based on some discussions, some interviews that we had with both chief executive officers and senior HR people. And what we found CEOs telling us is that of the issues and priorities that they're faced with these days at the end of the first decade of the 21st century, the innovation in business models is probably top of their list of priorities. So that underlines the importance of business model innovation. So what is business model innovation? Well, I've included here a quotation from an article in The Economist from a couple of years ago, which defines it as something that is more radical than conventional innovation in product or process. Essentially what it does is it changes around, or it can change around, the entire way that you do business and the entire way that you supply or deliver a service to your clients. So for example, Rolls-Royce is a famous company based in the UK but now a global company. A few years ago their approach to business innovation meant that they decided, rather than selling engines, which was their traditional discipline, that their model was actually to sell power, and they changed their product from selling engines to selling power by the hour, and that completely revolutionized the way they did their business. So it's one example of how even very large companies can move dramatically to change innovation. So that's really the subject today, which is business model innovation, and let's have a look at what that means for the role of HR. How do we define business model? Well, there are a number of definitions of what we mean by a business model, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to propose that we talk about the dominant performance logic of the organization, the way that money, costs and profits flow through the organization, the major organizational processes of customer service, production, commercial, and maintenance, the mechanisms that support the customer, and the flow of resources through the organization, which may be human resources, they may be manufacturing, they may be product, or indeed they may be financial. And so the way these flows, they used to be defined in a chain, in a linear format from beginning to end, but these days are more defined as a web, and hence the diagram of the way these things interlink inside the organization. So it really is the DNA of how an organization works. So that's the definition of business model. It really is very fundamental to the way organizations operate. So if we turn to HR and we think about the role of HR in strategy, and assuming that we take as given that our chief executive officers are thinking very carefully about how they can innovate with their business model, what our research concluded was that there are actually three very important activities and or capabilities that human resource people need to be able to possess so that they can work with organizations to help them at this strategic level of business model innovation. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is just talk through what we found in our research and what those capabilities are and the implications for HR people. So the first main strategic imperative that we discovered is the importance of the attitude of the senior executive in the organization towards HR. And I've picked a couple of examples from our research project that really explain in their words what I mean by their attitude. So here's one, and this came from a European HR director who said essentially that when she took her role as a senior HR person, she took it because she knew that she and the CEO that she would be working for connected. They had a very close relationship, and that she spent a lot of time with the senior executive in the organization. And the relationship, as she said, and I think this is very important, it almost became intuitive. It got to the point where they knew almost how each other were thinking. So that's a good example of the kind of very close relationship that is developed between the senior HR executive and the person who's running the organization. The second quote is from a CEO. So looking at it from the other side, who described HR, the delivery of HR, at 3 levels. And I think this is quite interesting to understand how HR can be delivered in an organization. So the foundation level, making sure that people are paid, recruited, are looked after, developed. So transactional work, as he called it. Level 2 is at the level of value tools. So how we engage with our employees, how we reward them, how we develop them. But level 3 is where he really felt the value of his HR director, and that's the level of strategic engagement. So it's the point at which your organization's HR strategy really becomes your organization's business strategy. The two become almost indistinguishable. So that's the strategic imperative. So what are the implications? Well, the question is, does the CEO really get and understand the value of the people to the organization in this question of business model change? If they do, and you have that kind of relationship, then you can move in your organization the development of HR strategy to the point where it's almost indistinguishable from business strategy. And one of the HR people that researched, she said to me, well, when I go into meetings, board meetings at the senior level of the organization, I essentially hang my HR hat on the door outside. And my role inside that organization is a strategic member of that organization rather than as their lead HR person. And that's really what happens. If it doesn't happen, then HR can still play an important role in the organization, but it is limited to those first 2 levels that we discussed earlier. So putting in great and efficient processes to make sure that the people are looked after in the organization, but not necessarily at the strategic level. It really is that important as a capability. So the second point, the second imperative, is about the restructuring of the business model. And one of the assumptions that underlies this is that actually, when we're talking about the business model, in most organizations these days, the people of that organization are really very central to that model. They aren't separate from it. They are, in a lot of cases, the business model, because often organizations only have the people of that organization as their asset. They don't have factories anymore. What they have are the knowledge and the expertise of those individuals. So the imperative is that whereas in the past many organizations used external consultancies to do this kind of work for them, what happens now, where the opportunity is for HR people to be in this space, to be expert in different organizational models, to be expert in an understanding of the general strategic direction of the organization, and therefore to be at the heart, or to give themselves the opportunity to be at the heart of strategic thinking with their senior executive team. So that requires a particular capability for our HR people. They have to know and they have to understand the nature of the organization's business. So one of our case studies was with Vodafone, one of the world leaders in mobile phone technology. And the European part of the business appointed a new CEO 3 or 4 years ago. And within the first 2 weeks of that business, the CEO called the HR director into his office and had a first discussion about what kind of organization they wanted to create in order to support a change in strategy for that organization from a product to a service business. And the HR person was able to engage with the CEO in an extremely high-level strategic discussion, which later resulted in a fundamental organizational change. But it was the HR director that the CEO called in first to talk about how they were going to restructure and to develop a particular level of organizational design. And that leads me to my third point about HR's about their capability being central to business model change. So here are another couple of quotations from our research. So the work that the CEO is doing in terms of business model change is owned by essentially 3 people: the chief executive, the head of HR, and the chief information officer, who is often playing an important role because information technology is often central to this kind of strategic imperative. So what happens then, and this is a quotation from the CEO, is that organization design, which previously has been relegated to a secondary strategic imperative, now becomes almost top of the list for CEOs to understand and to have that capability. So here's the opportunity for HR. The opportunity is for HR to become experts in principles of organizational design. The third and final capability is for HR to follow a particular strategic process, which is to have the ability within the function, the skill within the function, to know how to go about organizational design. And that's the first level on this diagram. The second level is for them then to be able, with that capability, to be able to facilitate board-level discussions about business model design. I gave you an example from Vodafone. Another example is where another of our clients, which was a company that made buildings, built commercial buildings, realized that their business model to deliver buildings to their clients was the wrong one. That what they needed to be delivering is the ability for people to be accommodated over a period of 20 years, the life of the building. And that led to quite a different approach, and it was the HR director that facilitated that discussion, which made a fundamental shift in the way that they did their business. So the third step on the diagram is to be able to draft that new design with the HR team. So the HR team, not just necessarily at the executive level, but at each level of the business, are able to go through a process of having their teams understand it. The fourth level is that the ability to analyze something that we call architectural capabilities. And an architectural capability is something that the organization possesses, which allows them to be flexible enough to move in several different directions with their new business model. So, for example, an architectural capability in the one I've just given you, where a company was moving towards the full life of a business, would have been the ability to design and develop full internet services inside a building that allowed that building to be operated. That was something that was an architectural capability for that organization. And then finally, that's all the design work. The HR units need to be able to facilitate the change as that organization design becomes implemented. So these are very new and very important capabilities for HR people now to develop. So just to summarize, what I've covered in this brief introduction to HR and strategy is the importance of these 3 capabilities. The relationship that you have with the senior person in the organization, the understanding of the deep understanding of the organization's business, and thirdly, the importance in developing a capability for organizational design. Now, one of the reasons why I think this is important for anyone who's embarking on a degree in organization design is that and strategy, HR strategy, is that the design of those programs these days have to take into account some of these strategic capabilities. So, given my background in HR, when we put together the MSc in HR for Roehampton, I was heavily involved in the design work, and these elements are built into the design of our program. So this is something that's a really important positioning these days for any master's program, that it allows HR people to combine their HR expertise with strategy and business expertise. And that is all I had to say, Pearl. So at that point, I'll hand back to you, and we'll see if there are any questions on anything I've covered.
Great, thank you, Craig, and thank you so much for that really interesting talk about the HR and the future of HR. And I think it's really interesting how you said that you really brought that into the program, and the importance of understanding the strategy and the wider area of how HR can have an impact in companies. So we've had some really interesting questions whilst you were speaking, and just to let you know, if you have a question and you still want to ask that question, please do so. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session as well, so keep on asking them. It's been great to see some interesting ones already. So someone was asking, they were saying, you've used a few examples of big companies, but they were saying, okay, I work for a small company and I don't have a COO. Does this kind of strategy still apply to them? Does it still affect them? Can they still apply some of these bigger kind of ideas?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Pearl, and I know that particularly if you're embarking on an MSc, it's quite possible that it's your objective to become the senior person in the organization, but perhaps at this point you're operating at a middle level or at a unit level, or perhaps you're embarking on your career in HR. I think it is really important to understand that what lies behind these ideas on strategic HR is actually a change in attitude on the part of both HR people and the organization to HR. And so if you're in a role where you're perhaps servicing a smaller part of the organization or a business unit, then it is entirely possible that you apply similar principles to the business unit. So for example, if your business unit has a particular budget challenge, or there's something in there that is involving a process of organizational change that is affecting your unit, then the same principles apply, that you develop, that you work on developing the closeness of relationship with your CEO, that you influence them in the understanding of what HR can deliver for the organization, and that you make sure that you have the kinds of skills and capabilities that I've been discussing that allow you to have that kind of role into the organization. So it's entirely possible that you are able to develop these principles even if you're not working with a CEO.
Great. And another question, and you mentioned just in the end of your conclusion that you had a lot to do with the design of the program. And so Mohammed here wanted to know, he said great introduction, so he just wanted to know the tools of the teaching. So how is this you mentioned the Human Resource Management Program has just been launched. How is this program being taught?
Well, the question is an interesting question. What it does, it gets into the way that we teach classes online. So we have a very important principle about the design. And I think, and I'd be happy to see if Mohammed wants to know a little more about it. But one of the really important principles is that, particularly at this level, and particularly with the kind of people we have on our program, is that a lot of the learning is from your fellow students. So what we expect and what happens, we don't expect it, but certainly what happens is that students bring into the classroom a lot of their own experience and a lot of their own examples. So similar that I've been doing in a very brief way this time. So they'll talk about what's happening inside their organizations, and then they'll be facilitated in the discussion by the member of faculty who'll be an expert in a particular area. And what they'll be able to do is to share their experience with their fellow students, and through discussion come to conclusions and to more insight into whatever the subject is that you're discussing. And I think even more importantly, as a result of that, take back some of that into effect in real time, the work that you're doing. Now, if the students aren't actually in the workplace, it doesn't matter, because obviously we provide students with reading and examples and activities to conduct. So they can also use the material, the reading material in the class, to base their discussions on. So it's a combination of reading, of discussion, of facilitation by the member of faculty, and by by collaborative activities to reach a different and higher level of knowledge on the subject. So that's a general example of how the classroom works. Pearl?
Great, thank you, Craig. And Colin's going to give us an overview as well of the online classroom and what you can expect from studying online with Roehampton. So I think that's a really nice overview from the HR perspective and what students can expect. And we'll save some questions for the next Q&A. So in the meantime, thank you, Craig, and thank you for that really good introduction. I think it's brought up some interesting aspects of how HR can go forward, and I hope those of you listening have found that useful. So going forward, we're going to reintroduce Colin back into the webinar, and Colin, so you're going to tell us a little bit about the online learning experience. So, from your perspective, if you can tell us a bit about how what students can expect from learning online. I think for a lot of students this may be a new thing. They may not have studied online for a long time, or not studied online at all. So can you tell us a bit about what Roehampton offers and what people can expect from the online classroom?
Definitely. It's something that we're very proud of, the particular learning model that we have at Roehampton at the moment. And I mean, the first thing to kind of make clear for anyone who hasn't really studied online before, or who might not be familiar with the way that Roehampton works online, is that it's a very, very different model to, any kind of preconceptions you might have about what distance learning is traditionally like. So unlike traditional maybe distance learning, where you'll get a lot of materials sent to you, you kind of work in isolation, just doing readings and maybe sending away an exam. We've tried to make the online model at Roehampton as close as possible to as if you were studying in a traditional campus situation, but to add the flexibility of studying online to that. So there's kind of really two sides to the study, is the way that I like to describe it. First of all, you'll have, as if you were studying on campus, you might have, a social side of things where you're kind of getting to know your classmates. As Dr. Craig said, you'll be involved in discussion. You'll be able to, if there's any kind of problems that you have, you'll be able to bring them forward to any kind of a support centre, whether that's us in the enrolment team or your own personal support as a student support manager. There's always someone going to be able to help you. We have a dedicated social network for that, InspireNet. So you have the social side of things just like you would on campus. And then, of course, most importantly, perhaps, you've got the academic side of things as well. So you've got the online classroom, where once again you can be involved in discussions, maybe more focused academic discussions in that case. You can, once again be involved with your lecturer. So if you ever need to have a one-to-one discussion about any kind of project work you're doing, or anything maybe that's a little bit tricky in your work, you need their advice. They're always there to help you. And you can also submit all your assignments as well through the online classroom. So you have, the two sides of studying on a traditional campus type study, but you also have the added flexibility of studying online. So you basically have your classroom with you all the time. As long as you have access to the internet, you can connect with your classmates, connect with your lecturers, do your studies on the go, and kind of decide maybe which hours of the day suit you best to do your study. And that student experience is something, it's really, really at the heart of the University of Roehampton's kind of ethos. I mean, just last year, the University of Roehampton was actually awarded the Times University, the best university in the UK for student retention. And that just shows, how much at heart student experience is for us here. So we've tried to make it something that, students are going to benefit from. It's going to enrich them, but it's also something that you're really going to enjoy.
Great, thank you, Colin. And for those of you who want a kind of a deeper insight into what it's like to study online, please do, talk to your enrollment advisor. They can talk to you in more detail about that. But I think that's a really nice introduction into what students can expect. Now, Dr. Craig Marsh mentioned the MSc in Strategic Human Resource Management. Now, that recently launched, so that's a quite exciting new program that we've just launched. So can you tell us a little bit about this program, and also what kind of student you're looking for to join this program?
Well, yes. I mean, it is the newest program that we currently have available for online studies, and maybe it's a little bit of a cliche to say it like this, but it really is. As the newest program, it's really at the cutting edge of HR studies at the moment. And there was a few really nice quotes that Dr. Craig had there, about how HR now is like maybe moving beyond just transactional work. HR is no longer just kind of an island within an organization, not really getting involved with any of the bigger decisions. The current program that's developed it's really, as I said, at the cutting edge. It's the freshest program at the moment that we offer. And the kind of student we're looking for, it's not really a student, with kind of no prior knowledge of HR, who's maybe thinking this might be a direction they want to move their career in. Or perhaps maybe looking for students who have experience in HR before, but want to get that. You want to add that business expertise, as Dr. Craig said as well, who want to maybe move into a more strategic role within the organization, but have the kind of HR experience from before to back it up, or maybe just experience managing personnel. So it's a very high-level program. And as I said as before, it's something we're very excited about, the newest program we have to offer. So starting on November the 7th, we'll have the very first cohort of students for the MSc in Strategic Human Resource Management.
Great. And can people still enroll for that start date? Is that still possible?
Yeah, there is time. My personal advice I would give to a student who wants to begin in November is, to try and work on your application as early as you can. The longer you have before the study starts, the better prepared you're going to be for your studies. As I said, in the social network that you have, this kind of preparation work you can do before class starts, so that you're not overwhelmed by the new experience of studying online. And the more you're prepared, the better student you're going to be in the first module. So the sooner you can get your enrollment done, the more successful you can be in that first module. So there's still plenty of time, but as I said, the more preparation time you have, the better.
Great, thank you. And we're going to come back to you in a bit, and
Sure.
You can talk a little bit more into the next steps and what people can do to apply for the program if they want to. So we've had some great questions come through. So this one's directed to Craig here. So they're saying, okay, they're not in a HR role. It says, I'm in personal administration. Can we still apply for the program? So basically they're in a personnel position. Can it still apply to them? Can they still apply some of these methods that you were talking about?
Well, indeed, and it's an interesting question, because obviously there are still a number of organisations that refer to their HR department as a personnel department. The name doesn't really necessarily mean very much. It may well be that you can have a very advanced personnel department and a not so advanced HR department. So I think if the outcomes, the learning outcomes from the program, and the messages from the program that are of interest to you, that you are interested in learning about how, especially in a global organization, how you become, or how you develop the skills to become a global HR player, then absolutely the program is of interest to you. One of the ways that we've designed the program, and it's touching on something that Colm said earlier, is that the introduction of the program really gives you a very broad induction into the field of HR, and in fact, the first module is oriented towards your own personal development and your own learning needs. In fact, so there's a great opportunity for you to think about your current position in an organisation, about your own development needs, and how you link that into the content that we deliver in the rest of the program. So yes, I would say that the program is especially suitable for those who are interested in moving into this kind of HR role, even if you're not actually in it already. Carl?
Great, thank you. And in the aspect of time, we're going to move forward. Thank you for all your questions. If you want to ask questions, continue to ask questions. We do have an enrollment advisor on the Q&A, so he will continue to answer your questions. But thank you again for sending those through. It's been very interesting, and I think it's brought some interesting insight into this area. So now, just to give an overview of, if you're keen to go forward, you're keen to take this next step and join the program, Colin, can you tell us how that would work and what someone needs to do to apply for the program?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm going to talk about the next steps of completing your application and applying for the program, but really the very first step and the most important one is to get in contact with your enrollment advisor. Use them for any questions, any extra questions you have, anything that comes to your mind that you're wondering about the program. We're here to help, to answer all your questions and to help you through that application process. So, I mean, when you speak with us first, we'll discuss the program with you. Make sure we understand your needs, identify, if this is the correct program for you, and then if it is, we can move forward towards, collecting your documents, working on your application together, and then, working towards getting you your login details for that student network so that, you can become part of that student network, connect with some of your future classmates, and start your preparation and your orientation for your studies. But my advice is, first step, most importantly, speak with your enrollment advisor and we can help you out all the way.
Great, thanks, Colin. And so that just leaves me to thank our two speakers today. It's been, I hope you found it interesting. Thank you, Craig, very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us a little bit about human resource management. It's been really interesting. And also, Colin, thank you for talking a little bit about Roehampton and the online learning. For those of you who want to connect with us on social media, we are on Facebook, so you can find us just by searching Roehampton Online. We also have a LinkedIn page, University of Roehampton Online, search that again. And then Twitter, UORL Online, and Pinterest. So do come and join us in our social communities. We'd love to see you there. And thank you again for joining us today and taking the time out to listen to this webinar. We hope that you have a very pleasant rest of your day, and also that maybe one day we'll see you within the online classroom. So thank you very much. Goodbye.